The idea of Australia often arrives in the American imagination as something distant and extreme, a place of vast deserts, unfamiliar wildlife, and a culture shaped by distance from the rest of the world. Many Americans expect sharp edges when they arrive, social barriers, cultural distance, or a subtle sense of being an outsider. What they often encounter instead is something unexpectedly gentle. The welcome feels warmer than anticipated, not because Australians make grand gestures, but because the culture itself seems designed to lower defenses rather than test them. From the very beginning, the atmosphere feels disarming. Cities hum with energy, but without the tension that often accompanies American urban life. Conversations move at an easier pace. Laughter is frequent, unforced, and rarely competitive. Americans accustomed to proving themselves through confidence or quick wit often notice that none of that seems required here. There is no need to explain success, justify ambition, or establish importance. The social air feels lighter, as if people are allowed to exist without constantly performing. This sense of welcome shows itself in small, almost invisible ways. Casual greetings feel sincere rather than transactional. Humor is self-deprecating and inclusive, rarely aimed at asserting status. Australians have a habit of flattening social hierarchies through language, treating strangers, coworkers, and friends with the same relaxed tone. For Americans used to navigating subtle power dynamics in everyday conversation, this can feel deeply reassuring. There is comfort in not being sized up. Another early surprise comes from how little attention is paid to difference. Accents are noticed, but not interrogated. Being American rarely becomes a defining feature of interaction. Questions, when they arise, are curious rather than judgmental. There is an underlying assumption that everyone belongs until proven otherwise. This quiet inclusivity contrasts sharply with the expectation many Americans carry, that being foreign will automatically require explanation or adaptation. The rhythm of daily life reinforces this sense of ease. Workplaces often prioritize balance over intensity. Leaving on time is normal. Taking breaks is not viewed as weakness. Conversations revolve around weekends, nature, and shared experiences rather than productivity or personal achievement. For Americans conditioned to equate value with output, this environment can feel both liberating and disorienting. The absence of pressure creates space, and within that space, many discover a calmer version of themselves emerging naturally. Even the physical environment contributes to the feeling of welcome. Outdoor spaces are woven into daily routines. Beaches, parks, and open air are not luxuries but extensions of everyday life. Social interactions often unfold outside, where formality dissolves more easily. Nature is not something conquered or controlled, but something lived alongside. This shared respect for the environment subtly shapes how people relate to one another, with patience, adaptability, and humility. Over time, many Americans realize that the warmth they feel is not directed specifically at them. It is simply how the culture functions. Australia does not roll out a red carpet. It removes obstacles instead. By rejecting excess seriousness, rigid hierarchy, and constant urgency, it creates a social landscape where newcomers are not asked to earn belonging. They are given room to settle into it naturally, often more easily than they ever expected. As days turn into weeks, this initial sense of ease deepens into something more structural. Americans often begin to notice that welcome in Australia is not expressed through enthusiasm, but through absence. Absence of scrutiny, absence of urgency, absence of social pressure. There is rarely a moment where newcomers feel tested or evaluated. Instead, they are allowed to move at their own pace, to observe, to adjust quietly without commentary. In a culture where understatement is valued, acceptance does not announce itself, it simply exists. One of the most striking differences lies in how Australians handle confidence. In the United States, confidence is often loud, forward-facing, and performative. It is encouraged early and rewarded visibly. In Australia, confidence is expected to be understated, almost invisible. Drawing too much attention to personal achievements can feel uncomfortable, even inappropriate. This cultural instinct acts as a social equalizer. For Americans arriving with the expectation that they must impress in order to belong, the realization can be jarring, yet it is also freeing. Without the need to constantly assert worth, interactions become softer and more human. Social bonding unfolds slowly, but without friction. Australians may seem instantly friendly, but not instantly intimate. This distinction often confuses Americans at first. Smiles, jokes, and casual warmth appear everywhere, yet deeper connections take time to form. Rather than feeling rejected, many eventually understand that this distance is protective, not dismissive. Trust is built through consistency, not intensity. When it arrives, it feels solid and unforced. This gradual rhythm creates a sense of emotional safety that many Americans did not realize they were missing. The workplace mirrors this philosophy. Hierarchies exist, but they are downplayed. Managers and employees often interact with the same relaxed tone. Titles carry less weight than attitude. Speaking up is encouraged, but not aggressively. Collaboration is valued over dominance. Americans used to competitive environments often notice a shift in themselves. They listen more. They interrupt less. They stop framing conversations as opportunities to stand out. Over time, this change feels less like adaptation and more like relief. Even disagreement feels different. Conflict is handled quietly, often indirectly. Australians tend to avoid confrontation unless necessary, preferring humor or understatement to diffuse tension. For Americans accustomed to directness, this can initially feel evasive, but it also reduces emotional volatility. Arguments rarely escalate, voices rarely rise. The social priority is harmony, not victory. In this environment, newcomers often feel protected from the constant edge that defines many American interactions. This gentle social fabric creates an unexpected emotional effect. Many Americans report a gradual lowering of internal tension. Shoulders relax, speech slows, the impulse to rush fades. The feeling of being constantly on begins to dissolve. Australia does not demand reinvention. It quietly invites recalibration. And within that recalibration, many discover that feeling welcome is not about being embraced loudly, but about being allowed to exist without resistance. By the time months have passed, the surprise is no longer about friendliness. It is about how deeply that friendliness reshapes perception. Many Americans begin to understand that feeling welcome in Australia has less to do with being received and more to do with being unburdened. There is less social armor required here. Less explanation, less self-justification. Life unfolds without constant comparison, and that absence quietly alters how people see themselves within it. What stands out most is the emotional neutrality of public life. Australians rarely dramatize success or failure. Wins are acknowledged, losses absorbed, and both are treated as temporary states rather than defining traits. This steadiness creates an emotional climate where newcomers feel safer making mistakes. There is little fear of embarrassment, little anxiety about falling short. Americans raised in a culture that often equates identity with achievement find this deeply disarming. Without pressure to impress, authenticity becomes easier. Over time, this cultural posture begins to soften internal habits. Americans often notice they speak differently. Less urgency enters their voice. Conversations feel less transactional. There is more listening, more pauses, more comfort with silence. Social interactions stop feeling like performances and start feeling like shared moments. This shift is subtle but powerful. It changes not just how people are treated, but how they treat themselves. The sense of welcome also reveals itself through equality. Australians are quick to deflate ego, including their own. Humor is often used to level the field, not to dominate it. No one is elevated too far above the group, and no one is pushed far below it. This cultural instinct reassures newcomers that they do not need to compete for space. Belonging is not scarce here, it is assumed. Even national identity plays a role. Australia does not define itself through superiority or comparison. It exists comfortably in its own rhythm, neither defensive nor performative. This confidence without bravado creates room for others to enter without friction. Americans often expect to feel like outsiders, but instead find themselves simply folded into the background of everyday life. Not highlighted, not diminished, just present. In the end, what surprises Americans most is not how friendly Australians are, but how little effort is required to be accepted. The culture does not ask newcomers to change who they are. It slowly removes the need to be anything else. And in that quiet removal, many realize that welcome is not something offered with words or gestures. It is something built into the way a society moves, speaks, and makes space for those who arrive expecting resistance, but instead find calm.